Over 7 o'clock. If you could all join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. If you all be seated, please. Madam Clerk, if you call the roll, please.
Yes. Councilor Bouchard.
Here.
Mayor Boulin.
Here.
Councilor Brown.
Here.
Councilor Champlin.
Present.
Councilor Fennessy.
Present.
Councilor Grady Sexton. Here. Councilor Keach.
Yes.
Councilor Kretovic.
Here.
Councilor Mattson.
Here.
Councilor McLaughlin.
Here.
Councilor McNamara.
Here.
Councilor Nyan.
Present.
Councilor Pierce.
Present.
Councilor Rice Hawkins.
Here.
And Councilor Todd.
Here. Great. Good to see everyone. So before I ask for a motion on the minutes, I just want to read something really quickly. Section 91-A:2. Meetings open to the public. Roman 2. This is the fourth sentence in the paragraph. Minutes of all such meetings, including non-public sessions, shall include the names of members, persons appearing before the public bodies, and a brief description of the subject matter discussed in final decisions. So recently we've had some conversations about the minutes, and I thought it would be a nice refresher to hear what this actual statute says and what the requirement is to meet. And I think that we can say with absolute certainty that the clerk's office has met those requirements and far exceeded those requirements throughout the course of my tenure being here. So with that, do I get a motion on the minutes?
Move approval.
Second.
Motion made and second to approve the minutes. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, ready for the question. Anybody not see anybody? Anybody want to discuss? Seeing none, yes?
Are we talking about the amendments that were?
We have a motion on the minutes. The motion's been seconded, and I'm asking if there's any discussion. But I will hopefully everybody will reflect upon what I just read and what the statute says, and then think about if the statute is met by what has been presented in the draft minutes. And once you think about that, I'm going to ask you, are we ready to vote?
Your Honor, may I just ask if amendments were suggested or recommended, are they automatically included, or is that, oh, okay, that's extra? That's something that we would have to say, please vote on it. Okay.
So parliamentary wise, we have a motion pending before us. That motion has been duly seconded. If you'd like to further amend that motion, you have the right to do that, and I would entertain that. You need a second to that as well. But I'm asking you as a council to consider the statute, RSA 91A:2, and ask yourself, has the ordinance been met by the draft minutes? I would suggest that they have. I would suggest that I think the clerk's office did an excellent job at characterizing the subject matter discussion and the final decisions. With that, are we ready to vote? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? And the ayes have it. We have our consent agenda before us. Is there a motion on the consent agenda?
Move approval.
Motion made and seconded to approve the consent agenda. I will recognize the fact that Councilor Nyan recused himself from item 13. Councilor Brown recused herself from item 13, 14, and 17. With that, is there any discussion on the consent agenda?
Your Honor, I think that was 12 and 13 for myself.
I apologize.
Your Honor, that would be 12 for 12 and 13 for myself. For me too.
So just add 12 for you.
Yes, sir.
Thank you very much. So noted. Councilor Brown. Everybody clear on? Councilor Kretovic.
Thank you, Your Honor. And you also said 14 for Councilor Brown as well.
I said 12, 13, 14, 17.
Thank you. Okay.
Councilor Nyan, 12, and 13. Is there anybody else? Did I miss anybody? Okay, we have a motion before us. It's been seconded. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The ayes have it. Takes us to our public hearings this evening. And
Excuse me, Your Honor.
what should be, why is the council be recognized?
17, I'm point of order.
Yep.
I believe I should have been recused from 17. Oh, okay.
Did I
My
not say that a
apologies.
couple times?
I thought I only heard 12 through 14.
My notes reflect 12, 13, 14, and
I
17.
apologize.
And I also followed the email that you sent to the clerk. Okay. Takes us to our public hearings this evening. We have several. Madam Clerk, if you would not mind reading item 23A, please.
Absolutely. It's a resolution appropriating the sum of $50,000 in the water production plant upgrades project and $50,000 in the Hall Street wastewater treatment plant renovations project for cybersecurity improvements projects, and accepting the sum of $100,000 from the New Hampshire Department of Environmental Services American Rescue Plan Act program.
Thank you very much, Mr. Manager.
Your Honor, members of the council, the water treatment plant and the two wastewater treatment plants rely heavily on technology to maximize operational savings to their respective enterprise funds and ultimately the ratepayers. This reliance on technology requires access to open platforms which allow remote access for operators in alarming protocol to reach operators immediately and timely. In consultation with the city's Information Technology Department, General Services, Water and Wastewater Divisions completed a vulnerability assessment and identified certain measures to enhance our facility's cybersecurity and mitigate the potential impact for a cybersecurity attack. The New Hampshire Department of Environmental Services through the Federal American Rescue Plan Act will provide grant funding for water and wastewater facilities not to exceed $50,000 per facility. With two distinct utilities, this represents a potential total of $100,000 for the city. $50,000 water, $50,000 in wastewater. I'd be glad to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. Any question from the manager? Seeing none, we'll open the public hearing. Anyone wish to testify on this item? Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing. Would anybody object to hearing item 23B and 23C together?
Nope.
Seeing none, Madam Clerk, if you could read both those, please.
Yes, the first item is a resolution appropriating the sum of $950,000 as a transfer to trust and authorizing the use of $950,000 from fiscal year 2022 general fund assigned fund balance. The second is a resolution appropriating the sum of $94,000 for furniture, equipment, and training, and authorizing the use of $94,000 in reserve funds for this purpose.
Thank you very much, Mr. Manager.
Your Honor, Mr. LeBrun will present.
Good evening, sir. Welcome.
Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council, I am very pleased to report that the general fund ended the fiscal year 2022 with a $28,200 surplus. This is a notable considering that the City Council used approximately $2.9 million of fund balance throughout the fiscal year to fund certain transfers and operations. And this surplus is after accounting for that use of fund balance. So we made up the full $2.9 million and ended up with an additional $28,000. So that's very good. The city also had better than expected revenues in a number of revenue lines. Property taxes were better, motor vehicle registrations, insurance distributions and credits, transfers and grants and donations. That was the ARPA money that we recorded in the general fund.
That's not fair.
Police special duties. You'll also see in the expense side that we had additional overtime charges there. Fire ambulance charges, construction permits, and then we had pluses and minuses in a number of other lines. On the expense side, we were very close overall, with some items under and some items over. We did realize some over expenditures in public safety in overtime due to vacancies. Some in emergency services, again, due to the special duties, and then some in the fire department. We did have some over expenditures in supplies due to winter maintenance. Some of the supplies for sand and salt, last year we had a pretty tough winter, so we spent more keeping the streets cleaned, and also for the maintenance of vehicles as well too. So the report, this report and resolution recommends transferring $950,000 overall to reserves, $500,000 for paving, $250,000 for equipment, $100,000 for recreation, and $100,000 for economic development. These reserves help us manage the upcoming budget for FY24 and possibly, years beyond that as well too. It further recommends appropriating $94,000 to fund a number of PCRs that were not funded in FY23, as well as a number of other furniture and fixture type items that were not budgeted for in previous budgets that we typically wait to see if we have any surplus funds available and if we're able to take care of those items. For the enterprise and special revenue funds, all funds except the inspection fund did better than expected in fiscal year 2022. As you know, starting in fiscal year '23, the inspection fund operations are now part of the general fund in engineering, so we won't see a separate engineering fund any longer, and that started in the budget that you approved back in June of this year. During the budget discussion, the city manager discussed how we watch closely all of the funds and discuss any concerns that we have with each one of the funds. The parking fund has been a fund of concern. In this year, we did better by $906,000. That was including a $438,000 allocation from ARPA money. So the fund still did better by $500,000. This is a very good result. Mr. Walsh and his staff really are to be commended for the work that they've done in this fund. The airport fund is $58,000 better, $31,000 in ARPA funds. Again, a very good result, and again, Mr. Walsh and his group are to be commended for the results here. The golf fund is $304,000 better than expected. There were no ARPA funds that were allocated to the golf fund, but Mr. Davis and his staff, along with Mr. Lamon, they do an incredible job with customer service and course conditions. They've really made customers very welcome at the golf course, and they've done an incredible job bringing revenue in. They are looking forward to a new design of a clubhouse, and certainly a continued positivity at Beaver Meadow as a year-round facility. The arena is $255,000 better. That is inclusive of $180,000 in ARPA funds. Mr. Bardwell and his staff continue to make great strides at the arena. The solid waste fund is $809,000 better than expected. That includes $386,000 in ARPA funds. Mr. Clark and the General Services group have done a great job in solid waste, but they will have an interesting couple of years ahead of them as we transition to a new contract, and I guess the Solid Waste Committee can attest to that. The water fund is $324,000 better. That includes about $63,000 in ARPA funds. Marco Philippon does run a good shop over there. He has the best water in certainly the state, probably the country. So. The wastewater fund was about $1.25 million better. There were no ARPA funds in the wastewater fund, and Mr. Driscoll does a great job. Certainly is very good at going after the revenue, and the revenue increases were in a number of different categories there. Overall, all of the departments really have done a fantastic job. They do a good job managing all of their operations. When you look at it from an individual point of view for each one of their operations, but as a city as a whole, it maintains the city solid footing financially, but really in excellent customer service for everybody. So they're all to be commended for good results overall. So glad to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. Is there any questions, Council? Pierce.
Thank you very much for that report. It's great news. The $22,000 in surplus, that equals what percentage of the total budget?
28,000 in surplus?
Right, you said it was 28,200?
Yes. I'm not sure that number actually registers on the Richter scale.
.000 like pi.
But like I'll go to the $2.9 million better from the use of fund balance that was saved, I guess, and that's the part that was really the notable amount, because it's kind of like saying that you're going to use $2.8 million from your savings account to maintain your household this year, and you didn't have to go and use that $2.8 million. You were able to do it with the money you had coming in.
Thank you.
Any further questions? Council Keach.
Thank you. So in terms of solid waste, what is your anticipated goal? I mean, sorry, anticipated. Just that's going to be a big number. Like, what do you think that's going to be?
I think it's a little bit premature to throw that out there. I think the solid waste group is working diligently on that right now, and I think they'll be coming back, in relative order, especially as we get into the fiscal year '24 budget with some better, solid information showing what that's going to look like. Obviously, the solid waste market, the recycling market, the collection market has changed considerably over the last number of years, and certainly going forward over the next number of years, it's changing considerably.
And I'm sorry to throw that on your plate.
Yeah, no, that's fine.
But it's going to be a big number, I think.
Yeah, I mean, for me to throw a number out there right now, that's really, I can't do that, Councilor.
But
Sorry.
that's going to be a big number, probably. Yeah. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Who else has questions? Anyone? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
This time, we'll open the public hearing on items 23B and C. Anybody wishing to testify? Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing. Madam Clerk, item 23D, please.
It's a resolution authorizing the city manager to submit an application in an amount of up to $500,000 and to accept and appropriate grant proceeds of up to $500,000 of community development block grant funds to support acquisition and redevelopment of real estate located at 6 South Street to create 8 units of housing to support persons exiting homelessness.
Thank you very much.
Your Honor, members of the council, Mr. Walsh will present as a reward for his tremendous financial returns. He gets to do the next 5 items on the agenda, so.
And towards that end, I would note the work of the advisory committee, who works with the parking committee and airport and all those other entities that Mr. LeBrun mentioned. Before you, members of the council, good evening. You have a variety of community development block grant items. They all require a separate public hearing. Towards that end, I will read into the record, as it's required by the program, the following. So for the first item, which is 23D, community development block grants, or CDBG funds, are available to municipalities through the New Hampshire Community Development Finance Authority. Up to $500,000 annually is available for economic development projects, $500,000 for housing projects, another $500,000 for public facility projects, up to $350,000 for emergencies, and $25,000 per planning grant study. All these projects that are funded with CDBG must clearly benefit a majority of low and moderate income persons. There's an informational packet about the Community Development Block Grant Program and these applications this evening that's on the back table by the entrance into the council chamber. This particular public hearing is regarding proposed application to the Community Development Finance Authority for up to $500,000 in CDBG housing grant funds. Of this total, $25,000 will be retained by the city for administrative and labor compliance costs associated with the project. We actually use those dollars to pay Donna Lane, who's our CDBG consultant. And the remaining $475,000 of the funds will be subgranted by the city to the Concord Coalition to End Homelessness, or an entity related thereto, to be determined, to support the acquisition and or rehabilitation of 6 South State Street in Concord into 8 units of housing for low and moderate income persons. This project does conform with the city's housing and community development plan goal related to affordable housing, and within the context of affordable housing, that goal states that it's the city's highest priority for the investment of local, state, and federal public resources in neighborhood improvement strategies, housing rehabilitation or replacement, and the rehabilitation or redevelopment of existing buildings for housing purposes, where doing so would not create an undue burden upon Concord taxpayers. Also, the city recognizes that the new construction of dwelling units may be necessary to meet the requirements of elderly and those with special needs, and that limited amounts of new construction of small affordable housing projects built within or adjacent to existing neighborhoods within the city's urban growth boundary may be necessary to help alleviate the serious problems of affordable workforce housing and affordable housing in general affecting the community. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. Any questions, Mr. Walsh? Ms. Fennessy.
Thank you. I just had one question because in looking at the report, actually, no, I'm sorry. I hold that question. I'm confused with the other one.
Any questions? Seeing none, thank you very much. Don't go far. Anyone wish to testify on this item? Good evening, welcome.
Can you hear me okay?
Absolutely.
Okay. Mayors, members of the City Council, City Manager, and City Clerk, I'm Roy Schweiker, and you all should have received a written testimony mine on this, so I'm not going to go into detail on that. I just want to extend it in a couple of ways. Number one, I think the problem is we need transitional housing. There's a bunch of people who apparently have Section 8 grants, but no one thinks they're a good risk to give them an apartment. And so if they could get a small apartment and keep it up for a while, then they could move on to a better apartment because landlords would take a chance on them. And then the smaller apartment would be available for new transitional people. The problem I see with this particular project, it will help, it will create more housing, but I mean, if you're getting an 1,100 square foot unit, I mean, I don't know the exact number because I don't have the dimensions, but that's what it looked like to me. You know, you're never going to be able to rent one like that on the private market for any reasonable amount, so you're going to stay there, you know, until you croak properly. So that isn't going to help the problem of transitional housing. It's just going to mean that CCEH is going to be a landlord-like catch. And I'm not quite sure that's what the intention is. So what I'd like to encourage the city council to do is to think about how we could encourage building of transitional housing like the one I, sent the plan of. And the problem is, we're in the process of adopting new zoning regulations that are designed to make city a middle-class community where it never snows. And, that's not really what we need here. They're eliminating the idea we can't have the mobile homes anymore. You can't have a tiny house that can be moved. You can only have them built on a foundation. So, already they're trying to eliminate a lot of, things that might create, housing people could afford. So I'd like to request that somebody try and figure out whether you can find a way to incorporate what I will call mini housing in the plan. Like, let's say every development has to have 5% apartments of 350 square feet or less. And those would be transitional housing. And I don't care how expensive the apartments are. I mean, the ones that we see here, I think they rent for like $1,400. So it's not like it's particularly cheap because it's an expensive building. But, at least it's something that's available for someone that doesn't need a lot of space. So I think we need to, figure, I mean, something like this, I see it not as let's build a, 50-acre lot with 500 of these. I see this as let's take one city lot and maybe put 4 of them on it. Spread out the people instead of having them all in one neighborhood. So, that's the first half. But the second half, I think the city needs to take control of the homelessness situation. I don't know how many of you remember when the guy from Portland, Maine came over and explained how they had made their Housing First plan work. And he was asked, what does it take to make Housing First work? And he said, the people, the clients, have got to pay their share of the rent and they've got to behave. And right now, we're not making people in Concord do either one. Where essentially, you can stay in the winter shelter for free. I don't see why that is. I think we should have a sliding scale there. If you get $1,100 a month for a disability, which I'm told by Mr. Yang is the average amount, you can pay $11 a night to stay there. And you're learning that it is not free to be homeless. You have to pay toward the system like everybody else. And I think that it's unacceptable to have mentally ill people forced to live in tents. I think we need to grab them and bring them back into the system and say, okay, you can stay in the emergency room until the state provides satisfactory housing for mentally ill people. Probably some sort of sheltered housing or something. We shouldn't be proud of the fact, oh, we let them all live out in the woods and cause trouble. And the same thing with people who are hooked on drugs. Right now, in effect, we're using property tax money to subsidize people's drug habit. And we shouldn't be doing that. I don't want to help people buy drugs. If people are really illegally using drugs, once again, they need to be arrested. They need to be told you can't have bail unless you have some sort of housing available to you, not going back into the woods. And once again, this would take care of a lot of the problems. And the last thing I'm going to suggest is the city needs to look into whether this grant next year could be used to have a city campground. So people that want to live in the woods have an official legal place to stay that comes with trash disposal, it comes with sanitation, it probably comes with some sort of security. So this is a reasonable thing. It's what people should expect to live in rather than randomly be sent around the city. Once again, I'm not an expert like Mr. Wallace in terms of what these funds are allowed for, but I think someone needs to look into, could we build a campground with these funds next year? And could we, instead of saying, oh, anyone who wants to can submit an application and we'll pick one, say, we are really looking for someone to submit an application for a campground and see what we can get. Anyway, thank you.
Thank you. Anybody have questions? Council Stein.
Thank you. Mr. Schweikert, did you say these individuals should stay in the emergency room until they find housing?
They can stay in the emergency room until they find effective treatment. These are people who are mentally ill. I think if you're mentally ill, it is ridiculous to say, okay, you go live out in the woods. I mean, the thing about mentally ill people is they're supposed to live in the least restrictive environment. And I think living out in the woods illegally is not an acceptable environment. They need something that's a little bit more restrictive. And I think that right now the state and the federal government are sticking us with expenses that we shouldn't be paying. We need to get these people what they need, which is a safe, secure place to live, rather than the system they're in now, which does not benefit them or anyone else. And one more thing I'll say is, someone said, well, these people cannot be expected to pay $35,000. Well, I think they probably can't immediately, but I'm aware of the situation in Pennsylvania where some people got a hacksaw and sawed down a fire tower. Boy, they were very energetic, I must say. And they were made to pay for it. And they didn't have $35,000, so they asked them to pay $10 a month until it was paid off. And the regional forester was happy every month when he saw the check come in. But this is what I'm saying about the people need to pay their share of the rent or the expenses, and they need to behave. And we're not doing that.
Anyone else? Seeing none, thank you very much. Appreciate you coming out tonight. Anyone else wish to testify on this item? Good evening and welcome.
Hello. Good
Hello,
evening.
thank you. Greg Lassard, Director of Housing Initiatives at the Concord Coalition to End Homelessness.
Karen Jansen, the Executive Director of the Concord Coalition to End Homelessness.
I just wanted to address some of the questions that Roy had, or some of those points. Matt's report was very thorough, so I don't want to rehash that. This is permanent supportive housing. It is not transitional. So permanent, we are trying for project-based vouchers for this project. And so that is housing. If we get the 8 project-based vouchers, that is housing, permanent housing for 8 individuals experiencing homelessness. Not transitional, they get to remain there. If the individual happens to move on, the project-based voucher stays with the project. So another individual that's experiencing homelessness can move into those units. So the permanent supportive housing is we're currently working, we're spending a great deal of time on supportive service plans for our clients, so that the caseworkers are trying to figure out exactly what their needs are and working with them now so that when they do move into these units, they can acclimate well into that neighborhood, and then to continue to work with those individuals while they are living there. It was pointed out, Roy pointed out, that some of these units are very large. That's the preliminary draft. When we went through planning suggested we were planning on putting some meeting space in there, an office space. Planning suggested that we also put a bathroom in for that staff person. So we're going to reallocate that space a little bit to accommodate a little bit of workspace there, a bathroom, and also what's not on those floor plans is a washer dryer. So that'll take a little bit of that space as well. But this is very unique in that one of the most difficult things that we have when trying to do a project like this is to have a willing seller that will work with us. This process is going to take us almost a year to get all the funding in place and everything together. And so in this market, as you know, a property will sell over the weekend. We've been driving to some and they've sold. So it is to find a patient seller. And this property actually lays out exceptionally well for what we're trying to do. The way the entrances, the stairwells, the hallways, it breaks up exceptionally well into these 8 units. And yes, you could certainly probably squeeze in more, but we're trying to right-size our solutions and not try to maximize how many individuals can get into a single building. So I think it's the appropriate amount of our clients for that particular building anyway. And so this is, as Roy said, a safe place for our clients to live. You know, this is space permanent space for 8 individuals, and that's a significant amount of individuals experiencing homeless in our community to move 8 into permanent supportive housing. This is a significant project that will have a significant impact on the problem in our community.
And I just want to speak to what permanent supportive housing actually is. It's an evidence-based practice that the mental health centers use, that substance use disorder treatments use. It's putting a case manager, assigning a case manager to a client and working them one-on-one, connecting them with other services. If it's more important that the mental health provider is actually doing the direct case management, then we work with the community mental health center to do that. It's the case manager makes sure they're also getting up to their doctor's appointments, their dentist appointments, they're accessing all the services that they need. And I believe that it was also submitted a number of letters of support from the organizations that we work with to help provide these services.
Thank you very much. Anybody have any questions? Seeing none, thank you both for coming out.
Thank you all.
Appreciate it. Anyone else wishing to testify? Okay, seeing none, we'll close public hearing. And Madam Clerk, item 23E, please.
Yes, it's a resolution readopting the city's anti-displacement and relocation policy statement and procedures in support of the city's community development block grant application to the New Hampshire Community Development Finance Authority to support acquisition of real estate and development of residential dwelling units at 6 South State Street by the Concord Coalition to End Homelessness.
Thank you.
Your Honor, this is related again to the Concord Coalition to End Homelessness CDBG application. Specifically, this plan establishes procedures that the city or its subgrantees must adhere to when expending community development block grant funds to support projects that may involve temporary or permanent displacement of residents or businesses. Said procedures conform with the Uniform Relocation Act. The document must be adopted by the City Council for each individual CDBG application. In this particular case, there may be some displacement that may occur because of this project. I would note on page 3 of the resolution, there's a typo. The address of 6 South Main Street is written. It should have been 6 South State Street. We'll have to correct that with the clerk's office. That's my fault. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
What's that again? The six should be.
I think it's right in the title there, in the midway down, page 3.
Got it. Thank you. Any questions, Mr. Walsh?
That was my question.
Oh, excellent. Thank you.
This time we'll open the public hearing. Anyone wishing to testify? Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing. Madam Clerk, item 23F, please.
Yes, it's a resolution authorizing the city manager to submit an application in an amount of up to $500,000 and to accept and appropriate grant proceeds of up to $500,000 of community development block grant funds to support acquisition and renovation of real estate located at 27 Warren Street by the Crisis Center of Central New Hampshire to create office space to provide support services to victims of domestic violence.
Mr. Walsh.
Your Honor, this proposed application to the Community Development Finance Authorities for up to $500,000 in CDBG public facility funds. Of this total, 25 will be retained by the city for administrative or labor compliance costs associated with the project. Again, that is going to go to our CDBG consultant, Donna Lane. And $475,000 of the funds will be subgranted to the Crisis Center of Central New Hampshire to support the acquisition and/or rehabilitation of 27 Warren Street into client-serving offices for the CCCNH. The majority of the clients of which are low and moderate income persons. This project conforms with the city's housing community development plan goal of, quote, is the intent of the city to support local social service agencies in their efforts to acquire or rehabilitate their facilities to serve low and moderate income clientele. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. Any questions, Councilor Fennessy?
Thank you. I noticed in the proposal, there was a different property that had been identified. With this application, is it tied specifically to a property, or, you know, if this property falls through, do they still get the grant money with the potential for a different acquisition or renovation?
This grant application is tied to 27 Warren Street. The public hearing is on 27 Warren Street. At the time when they submitted their proposal to the city, they hadn't identified a location yet, which is why the proposal was slightly different than what ultimately came before the council. But 27 Warren Street, these dollars would have to be used at.
Any further questions? Seeing none, we'll open the public hearing. Anyone wishing to testify on this item?
Everybody.
Welcome.
My name is, thank you. My name is Claire Grunfelder. I am the board chair, sorry. Haven't done this before, for CCCNH, so I'm here to answer any questions. Unfortunately, our executive director is unwell and couldn't be here, so I'm here in her place. So if you have any questions, feel free to ask. I might not know the answer, but she's watching us and she will text me the answer. I know it. But I would like to say sincerely thank you for your support. This means a lot to us.
Anybody have any questions? Seeing none?
Okay.
Appreciate you being here.
Thank you
Thanks.
very much. Thank you.
Okay, Madam Clerk?
Next item is a resolution readopting the city's,
Oh, I apologize. Did you want to testify? I'm sorry. I looked out and I didn't see any hands, but I would love to have you come testify. Sorry about that.
We never closed the public hearing either. Anyway. I'll tell you a story which most of you are new and haven't heard recently. My father was once talking to a politician in Concord, and he was complaining that property taxes were too high. And this person said, nobody I know thinks property taxes are too high. And it was probably true. This person lived on Auburn Street, and probably all their cronies could well afford to pay them. But that's not necessarily true for the people in the city at large. Remember last time I had the Andrew Yang question, how many of you are your 5 best friends, all college graduates? And I haven't got a whole lot of people saying, oh, that's not true of me. So, you're a very elite group, and you just don't understand that some people in this city are struggling. I mean, I'm a kind of tear down, let's say. My project today was trying to figure out if I knew anybody that had a garage so I could do a critical brake job. But anyway, so it appears to me, as if reading the description of this grant is for public facilities, and we could use it for some of this money that is being spent on the wastewater plant. We could maybe use it for a community center in Pennacook. Now, why aren't we using this $500,000 to reduce our taxes instead of giving it to an outside organization? So what I'd like to suggest is that we take the grant application and say, okay, we will give you $174,000, which is the same percentage of your expense that we're giving the Concord Coalition to End Homelessness. We will take the other, whatever it is, $326,000, and put it toward the wastewater plant or the community center or something that will benefit the taxpayers by reducing the amount we have to spend. And I noticed in here that the committee recommended that the city manager approve this. And if somebody gets up and says, well, the committee recommended we have to do it, I will say that's just another example of, what is claimed not to happen. That is this really a done deal that the public hearing is a waste of time because you have to approve what the committee says? Will you actually consider testimony in the public hearing and consider maybe we need to give the taxpayers a break on this? And the last thing I want to say is I have 2 more very brief stories. I believe them to be true. What I would most like is if I'm told they're absolutely wrong. And that will never happen because I would like to think that's the way things work. Somebody I know got in a fight with their boyfriend that they were living with, and they got shoved into a wall and their head put a dent in the sheetrock. And so they called 211 and said, can you get me into a shelter? And they said, no, there's a waiting list for 2 months to get into the women's shelter. So you have to plan your crisis 2 months in advance, apparently. And, this is, to me, unacceptable. It maybe should be a bunk room with other women in bunk beds, but if someone has a domestic violence issue, they should be helped immediately. And in another case, someone, in this case, their shoulder had been dislocated by an abusive boyfriend, so they couldn't drive. And they wanted to get a restraining order. So once again, they called 211 and got connected to some group that supposedly helped people like this. And they said, come up to the courthouse and we'll help you get one. And they said, I can't drive. Why don't you pick me up? They said, oh, we don't do that. We'll meet you up there. Maybe these people don't have a car, but it seems like they could have got a taxi and picked this woman up and got her there. I mean, isn't that what a full-service operation should do? So I think that, maybe this outfit needs to, first off, if they're not the ones that, if they have a better system and they're not the ones that 211 is calling, they need to talk to 211 about, we need to call us and not somebody else that can't help people for 2 months. And the other thing is, you know, if this is the truth, that that's the way it happens, then maybe they need to spend less time inventing new headquarters and more time finding a better service plan. Thank you.
Does anyone have any questions? No. Ms. Grace, next.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I don't have a specific question for Mr. Schweiker, but I am concerned about possible misinformation being spread to victims of domestic violence. So could we offer the board chair of the Crisis Center of Central New Hampshire the opportunity to clarify any of these points if she'd like to?
She always could do that,
I
absolutely.
think that would be wonderful.
Thanks.
Thank you very much.
Careful your chair. There.
Sorry?
Careful when you back up. It's tight
That
quarters.
would be me that would
Yeah.
do that, yeah. Okay, thank you for inviting me back up. Thank you very much. As the last gentleman has been speaking, our executive director has been texting me. She is watching us. So we do serve over 400 domestic violence survivors in Concord. Don't forget, CCCNH serves all of Merrimack County, so that's obviously not just Concord. There are other towns that need our assistance as well, including Franklin, Pittsfield, New London, Henniker, some of those areas that do also need our help. So it's not just restricted to Concord. We do recognize that transportation is an issue, and we work very hard to try to help those people that need to get to us for assistance for the help that they need. This building, I know it's just located down the road here. It's very centrally located. I think we're all aware that New Hampshire does have some limitations with transportation, but certainly the more centrally located we are, the easier it is for people to get around the city, to get to the resources that they need. We are located right now in a leased facility, which is located I can't remember the name of the street, but it's down there by Gary's Auto Service. I think that's South Main Street, which is not so easy to get to, and it is a leased place, and we only have that until the end of April. It's not ideal. We don't have any privacy. We don't have the space to serve our victims the best that we can, but this facility will allow us to and continue to get people that need help. Victims of sexual and domestic violence, don't just come themselves. They bring children, they bring family, they bring pets, and it's our responsibility to help those people. So, answer any additional questions.
Thank you.
Okay.
Actually, since you're here, anybody further clarification? Appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else will testify? At this time, we will close the public hearing. And Madam Clerk, I believe we're at 23G, please.
Yes, it's a resolution readopting the city's anti-displacement and relocation policy statement and procedures in support of the city's community development block grant application to the New Hampshire Community Development Finance Authority to support acquisition and redevelopment of real estate located at 27 Warren Street to provide office space for the Crisis Center of Central New Hampshire for the purposes of providing support services to victims of domestic violence.
Thank you very much, Mr.
Your Honor, this plan establishes a procedure that the city or its subgrantees must adhere to when expending community development block grant funds to support projects that may involve temporary or permanent displacement of residents or businesses. Said procedures conform with the Uniform Relocation Act. This document must be adopted by the City Council for each individual CDBG application, which is why you're doing this again tonight. There is no displacement that is anticipated with this project. The property is being voluntarily vacated. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. Anybody have any questions?
Quick question regarding the funding. I see they have up to $25,000 annually for feasibility and planning. With these community development block grants, if we vote no on this, can this money be used to offset taxes?
Can this money be used if we receive the grant?
The grants.
Could I? Sure. You might want to explain the difference between an entitlement community and a non-entitlement community.
Sure. So there's two different classifications of CDBG funds. This goes back to 1974. It has not changed. The first one are called entitlement communities. Places like Nashua, Manchester, Portsmouth, Dover, Somersworth are all entitlement communities that were set based on their demographics in 1974. Concord is not one of those. In those communities, they have more flexibility on how they can use their CDBG funds, which could in turn help with reduction of taxes. In Concord, we have to compete with all the other municipalities in New Hampshire for CDBG funds every year. And so in this case, we can only apply for projects, and those dollars have to go to specific projects. They couldn't be used for tax relief in any shape or manner. There is a possibility that funds could be used for some public projects, like was alluded to earlier and as mentioned in the staff report, water, sewer, things like that, which could have impacts on ratepayers for those funds. But we couldn't receive CDBG dollars to augment a portion of the city's operating budget and therefore reduce taxes.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Seeing none, thank you. This time we'll open the public hearing. Any wishing to testify?
This really relates to the last one. She didn't deny that you have to wait 2 months to get into the shelter. I mean, maybe she should get her boss to send her another text and say, how long do you have to wait to get into the shelter? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else wishing to testify? If you have the answer, great. If you don't, I wouldn't even justify his comments.
I will just quickly say that we do have a shelter here in town, that we will house people as quickly as we can. If not, we do partner with hotels in the area, so if people are in need of housing, we will work very hard to get them to those resources if they need them. And we also have housing advocates that will help people move out of our transitional housing, our shelter, into more reasonable accommodation and permanent housing. Housing and credit issues can be a big issue for victims of sexual and domestic violence. So, thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, seeing none, we'll close the public hearing. Madam Clerk, item 23H, please.
It's a resolution readopting the City of Concord's Housing and Community Development Plan.
Mr. Walsh.
Your Honor, the purpose of this plan, which is separate from the city's master plan, is to affirm the city's goals relative to housing, economic development, and community development, and to ensure that they align with various New Hampshire Community Development Finance Authority and U.S. housing and urban development requirements associated with the CDBG program. The plan must be readopted every 3 years. This plan was last adopted on January 13th, 2020 by Resolution 9264. Therefore, the plan must be readopted this evening in order for us to proceed with the 2 CDBG applications that we discussed earlier this evening.
Thank you very much. Any big questions for Mr. Walsh? Seeing none, thank you. Anybody wishing to testify on this item? Okay, seeing now, we'll close the public hearing. Madam Clerk, public hearing action phase, item 24, please.
Yes, it's a resolution appropriating the sum of $50,000 in the Water Production Plant Upgrades Project and $50,000 in the Hall Street Wastewater Treatment Plant Renovations Project for cybersecurity improvement projects and accepting the sum of $100,000 from the New Hampshire Department of Environmental Services.
Very much. Is there a
Move
motion?
approval.
Second.
Motion made and seconded to approve this item. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Have received the necessary 2/3. The motion is adopted. Madam Clerk, item 25, please.
It's a resolution appropriating the sum of $950,000 as a transfer to trust and authorizing the use of $950,000 from fiscal year 2022 general fund assigned fund balance.
Move approval.
Second.
Motion made to approve this item and seconded. Is there any discussion?
Your Honor, I'd like to recuse myself from this and the next one.
Okay, we'll do them one at a time. How's that? Council Brown's recused this item, item 25. Councilor Knight.
Thank you. I just wanted to pick up on something that Deputy City Manager LeBrun had mentioned, which is the outstanding work of the city and its staff to generate this type of savings, which led to a surplus, and it wasn't without a lot of effort, where we had additional revenues and reduced expenses, and this was a tremendous financial event for the city, which shouldn't go unnoticed. So thank you to everybody involved.
Thank you. Any further comments?
I would just like to chip on a bit. I certainly appreciate it. I think with the budget our size, and I tried to do the numbers, and I had to go out 4 zeros before getting a 2. I think it's a great balance between taxpayer revenue and the management of expenses. So I would just like to add my thanks to the group also. Thank you.
There was a question that came up earlier on, which was the you know, 28,000 versus the 2.9 million. 2.9 million is about 6.4%, so, of our tax rate. Thank you.
Okay, so we have motion and seconded before us. Ready for the vote? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? All those opposed? I have received necessary two-thirds. The motion is adopted. Madam Clerk, item 26, please.
It's a resolution appropriating the sum of $94,000 for furniture, equipment, and training, and authorizing the use of $94,000 in reserve funds for these purposes.
Move approval.
Motion made and seconded to approve this item. Council Brown has recused herself. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, ready for the vote. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Have received necessary two-thirds. The motion is adopted. Madam Clerk, item 27, please.
It's a resolution authorizing the city manager to submit an application in an amount of up to $500,000 and to accept and appropriate grant proceeds of up to $500,000 of community development block grant funds to support acquisition and redevelopment of real estate located at 6 South Main Street to create 8 units of housing to support persons exiting homelessness.
Move approval.
Second.
Motion been made and seconded to approve this item. Is there any discussion? Councilor Crederick.
Thank you. I need to recuse for an indirect conflict of interest.
Councilor Fennessy.
Thank you. I just want to thank the coalition for moving ahead. It seems to be a great project. I know Councilor Champlin, I think, said at the last meeting that tackling the homelessness issue, there's not one solution. It's going to be a series of different solutions to address that issue. And I think this is a good step. It may only be 8 people, but it's 8 people that we are moving to a better place. So thank you very much for all your hard work.
Councilor Champlin.
I'll second Councilor Fennessy's eloquent words.
Councilor Pierce.
As a member of the CDAC committee, we sat and went through this, and they did a great job of presenting what they wanted to do and their long-term plan, and I think working with the city and the planning department and all the departments involved, they came up with a good solution. So my thanks to them.
Thank you. Anyone else? Seeing none, ready for the vote? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Have received necessary two-thirds. The motion is adopted. Madam Clerk, item 28, please.
It's a resolution readopting the city's anti-displacement and relocation policy statement and procedures in support of the city's community development block grant application to the New Hampshire Community Development Finance Authority to support acquisition of real estate and development of residential dwellings at 6 South Main Street by the Concord Coalition to End Homelessness.
Move approval.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, ready for the vote? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? And the ayes have it. Motion is adopted. Madam Clerk, item 29, please.
It's a resolution authorizing the city manager to submit an application in an amount of up to $500,000 and to accept and appropriate grant proceeds of up to $500,000 of community development block grant funds to support acquisition and renovation of real estate located at 27 Warren Street by the Crisis Center of Central New Hampshire.
Move approval.
Second.
Motion made and seconded to approve this item. Is there any discussion? Councilor Crederick.
As a board chair, or past board chair, sorry, Claire, I have to recuse. Thank you. I'm still on the board for 1 year.
Oh, sorry.
Thank you.
Your Honor, I'll also recuse myself.
Councilor Crederick, six. Recuse yourself. Any discussion? Councilor Champlin.
Thanks, Your Honor. I would just like to compliment the Crisis Center for the great work that they do and the important work that they do in our region and our community. If you just not let me wear high heels again, I would really sincerely appreciate it. That would be a great thing, but if I have to wear them another year, I will.
Anyone else? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Have received necessary two-thirds. The motion is adopted. Madam Clerk, item 30, please.
Yes, it's a resolution readopting the city's anti-displacement and relocation policy statement and procedures in support of the city's community development block grant application to the New Hampshire Community Development Finance Authority to support acquisition and redevelopment of real estate located at 27 Warren Street for office space for the Crisis Center of Central New Hampshire.
Thank you very much.
Approval. Second.
Motion made, second to approve this item. Is there any discussion? Councilor Crederick.
Thank you, Your Honor. I know the reports include the Coalition to End Homelessness as well as the Crisis Center for Central New Hampshire, but the actual ordinance does not. So asking Your Honor, would that preclude me from voting on this item?
Sure.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any discussion? Seeing none. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The ayes have it. Madam Clerk, item 31, please.
It's a resolution readopting the City of Concord's Housing and Community Development Plan.
Move approval?
Second.
Motion made, seconded to approve this item. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it. Motion is adopted. Madam Clerk, item 32, please.
It's a report from the Director of Human Resources recommending modification of a permanent part-time position to a full-time permit technician in the Code Division of the Community Development Department.
Mr. Manager.
Members of the council, I'd ask the Director of Human Resources to come forward to present. You all know Jen Johnston.
Good evening, Mayor.
Good evening and
Council.
welcome.
Thank you. The Code Division of the Community Development Department is looking to take what is a vacant permanent part-time position of 20 hours coupled with a filled permanent part-time position of 20 hours and combine that into a full-time position. The position of permit technician. About 3.5 years ago, we had a 28-hour per week administrative person who handled the front desk transactions in the Code Division. And through some restructuring, we went to these two 20-hour position permit technicians to handle those types of issues that came into code as well as front office work. In the subsequent years, we've turned over 5 people in that position. Just filling part-time positions in this current employment environment has been difficult. And that turnover causes a lot of issues within the Code Division on delivering service to our contractors and citizens that come in for service because of the constant need to retrain. We've also implemented, some of you may be aware of EnerGov as a permit tracking system. And there's been a learning curve for that on both sides, staff and the public. So we looked at, in light of this vacancy, the making this a full-time position and what that would mean for service within code, evaluating it with the code administrator and with the acting deputy city manager. We felt like this was the best move for the division to provide stability. And we have a person in the job who likely we would turn over if we did not make it full-time, because that is what that individual is looking for. So should you approve this report, we would post this job as we do with all promotional and full-time opportunities. But we do have an incumbent that we think would be a good fit for the full-time job and be able to provide that continuity of service. Happy to answer any questions of something I didn't cover.
Thank you very much. Any questions? Seeing none, appreciate it.
Thank you.
We do have this item before us. There is a question to approve this report. Is there anybody wishing to make a motion?
So
Approval?
Motion is made and seconded to approve this item. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it. Motion is adopted. There's no new business, unfinished business not coming off the table, and any comments by city councilors?
Comments by
Councilor
Thank you, Your
Craven.
Honor. Last month at the city council meeting, we should have taken a moment to talk about our dear friend and former city councilor, Alan Bennett. Alan passed away in November, and, you know, as sometimes happens, the meeting gets long, and Alan was skipped. But the spirit and energy of Alan, that for sure, was here at the council table. And when he did serve with us, he definitely was not forgotten. With the lateness of the meeting and some of the comments, if Alan Bennett would have been present, he probably would have thrown his glasses down on the table and pushed himself away from the chair and muttered some really cool Yankeeism. And he would not care if it was on a hot mic, not one bit. When Councilor Nyan tells us that nothing good happens after 10 p.m., he is 100% correct. And Alan would have agreed with that statement without a doubt. Alan advocated deeply for the residents of Ward 6. And other counselors here at the table appreciated and absolutely respected his perspective because he was a Concord boy and he was never self-serving. And the real truth about Alan was he was an absolute teddy bear. His most prized possession was his family home on Grove Street. He loved how the houses in his neighborhood were close together. And he also loved that the people living in those houses were just as close. And he hated the scores of out-of-town landlords buying up the properties in Ward 6 because they had no care for humanity or humility to the people that lived in those houses. But Alan welcomed every single person to his neighborhood, and he advocated deeply for them. The love of his life was Maura, and he let everyone know it. He was not shy about sharing this deep affection that he had for her, and she was just as well connected in our community. So for Maura and the rest of Alan's family, our deepest sympathies from the council, from the city. He was our friend. His wisdom, his love of Concord, and for sure his Yankee swear is often missed at this table.
Hear, hear.
Also, thank you. Council Brown.
Thank you, Your Honor. Tonight I want to acknowledge the tragic passing of an amazing leader, Elizabeth Herman, known by everyone as Becky. She was a leader and an inspiration to her family and her community. As a library director in Chelmsford, Mass., a library trustee here in Concord, a Library Foundation board member, and a resident of Ward 5. I had the great fortune to witness Becky's leadership at work as she shared excellent recommendations based on her successful experiences and while walking Concord neighborhoods to work out a problem. Her daughters shared that walking was how she processed things. She was generous with her time, her knowledge, and her passion, and I am so sad that I will not have more time to learn from her. In her honor and in her spirit, I would like to welcome folks to join me this Thursday and find comfort among books at the Concord Public Library from noon to 1 p.m. I'll be at the table to the right by the wooden woman sculpture. At 1 p.m., in Becky's honor, we will head to Memorial Arch in front of the State House and walk along Main Street to Gibson's Cafe and Bookstore, where I will be until 3 p.m. Please join me, share stories about Becky, talk about our favorite books or what you're reading now. Let's process together and console ourselves with conversation and books. I'd also like to draw attention to the fundraising efforts of the Friends of the Merrimack River Greenway Trail. They're raising money to match a grant. If they raise enough money to match this $275,000 grant, the section along the river between exit 14 and 13 will be created this year. I hope that everyone who has come out in support of river access chimes in. This is our opportunity for river access, but it is only possible if people donate money. They are $129,923 short. Please go to their website, mrgt.org. And lastly, I'd also like to alert folks to the opportunity to give input on what our riverfront will look like across Loudon Road at Everett Arena. This is the newly titled Merrimack River Recreation and Open Space Corridor. The Community Visioning Charrette will take place at the Citywide Community Center next Thursday, January 19th at 6 p.m. Please come and think big. We're hoping to have a plan in place within 5 months, and we need everyone's input because this location is at the heart of our city. It is 1 mile from the community center, 1 mile from White Park, and a half mile from the State House. Again, that's January 19th at 6 p.m. at the community center on 14 Canterbury Road. Donate to the Greenway Trail if you would like to see a river walk this year. And join me this Thursday at the library, Main Street, and Gibson's from 12 to 3 to celebrate books and the book lovers who inspire us. Thank you.
Anyone else? No. I just, I had two things, and they've both been covered, but just because they've been covered, I think I'm going to add my 2 cents. Both Becky and Alan are my friends, and it's the one benefit, I think, of, being in this position that we get to sit around this table is we get to meet some really special people. People you may not have had the opportunity to meet, but for the sake you're here. And, it's interesting how you learn to trust folks and their opinion, their advice, and, we all have those folks in our lives. And Becky was always the one I went to, anything library related, but she was so much more than in a bigger picture than library. And she and her husband were just an absolute force. So I won't tell you where we met, because we usually cheers. But Becky was just a wonderful person and so dedicated to not only profession but her community, and I truly miss her. And Alan, I wish I could actually tell you stories about Alan, because most of them probably be really inappropriate. But he and I had a great time, and he was wonderful to serve with in all these years. And there was never ever a doubt that the only thing Alan cared about was the city and making it a better place to live. It's funny, we talk a lot about like little things that happen, and you wonder why they do, and like, why is there a stop sign at the top of Liberty Street that goes nowhere? I mean, there's the stories to every one of these little things. And so oftentimes when people complain about overnight parking on the street, I used to say, just call Alan, because it was his idea to do this. In fact, when we first did it, we did a pilot project in Ward 6.
Yeah.
And it went pretty well, so Alan's like, we got to do it everywhere. And sure enough, we did. And if you think about that one move that he made, and it was really his idea, it completely changed the characteristics of the whole kind of downtown, enabling people to, turn more housing into multifamily and things like that. So, but Alan, your description of him throwing off his glasses and pushing the chair back.
Oh, you forgot to swear.
That was the move. So, anyway, they'll both be really missed, and I loved them both, so I know we'll all miss them. Anyone else? All right. With that, Mr. Manager, do you have anything?
Nothing to add, Your Honor.
Okay. We do have a few information items that you can peruse at your own convenience. And with that, I believe we do have one item for suspense. Madam Clerk?
Yes, it's a report from the City Solicitor's Office regarding a tentative agreement with Local 2322, United Automobile Aerospace Workers of America.
Thank you. I'm just going to read this real quick, but I also want to point out that typically when we have contracts that have been agreed to by both parties, we put them in the consent agenda for people to be able to see in the public. We did that last month. You probably saw several of the collective bargaining agreements were put there. Unfortunately, this one wasn't agreed to until just recently, and the contract actually ended at the end of last year. So for the benefit of moving along for not only the workers but for everyone else, I'm asking the council to approve this to approve this contract this evening. And I'll simply read: the accept the report approving the cost items for a 2-year collective bargaining agreement between the City of Concord and Local 2322 International Union, United Automobile, Aerospace, and Agriculture Implement Workers of America, UAW, covering the period of January 1st, 2023 through December 31st, 2024. There are two primary things. One would be new cost items in the tentative agreement are summarized below. One is wages, which are COLAs. The first year of contract is 4% COLA. The second year of the contract is 4% COLA. The cost of the 4% COLA for the 2-year contract is estimated to be $258,100 and $272,500 in the second year of the contract. The holidays that added June 13th, and there is no anticipated overtime costs associated with the additional holiday for a 2-year contract. So thank you for giving me the opportunity to read this whole thing, because it didn't get into the agenda earlier, but I wanted to make sure everybody heard exactly what it was. So with that, is there a motion?
Move approval.
Second.
Motion made and seconded to approve this item. Accept the report. Any further discussion? Council Chambliss?
Your Honor, I'd just like to compliment city staff for negotiating this contract, and also note with great satisfaction the inclusion of Juneteenth as a holiday. Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you. Anyone else? Seeing none, ready for the vote? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, and the ayes have it. Motion's adopted. Anybody else have anything before we adjourn? Somebody like to make the motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Motion made to adjourn. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Have a wonderful week, everyone.
So good to have you.